The biggest game in the Pac-12 this week just might be Oregon State and Washington State up in Pullman, and it's for reasons that go beyond football.
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights and soon to be mostly team-free, but until then, beloved and loaded Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. This game between Oregon State and Washington State on Saturday has me all sorts of fired up. I am very ready to consume this football game via the television apparatus, one that has become a little bit more controversial in terms of do people like it or not like it because of the influence it's having on the sport. So the Cougs and the Beavs have a fantastic conference opener. They're both 3-0. They're both in the top 25. Both are trying to show that they belong in the upper echelon of the conference contenders here in the Pac-12 in 2023. And both can make a big statement on Saturday, not just by winning this football game, which looks like it is a coin flip, go either way sort of game. Oregon State currently favored by 2.5, subject to change throughout the week. That's an early contender for the Pac-12 prime picks, though I like the Beavs right now. But the Cougs are a good football team, make no mistake about it. Not going to shock me if they win this game. But as has been the case for the last several months, this matchup is going to get overlooked. Is College Game Day going there? No, they're going to Ohio State, Notre Dame. All right. Is Big Noon Kickoff going there? No, well, no, of course not. Why would they ever go up to Pullman? Is Josh Pate going to go there? No, he's going to go to Ohio State, Notre Dame as well. Disappointed in my guy Josh Pate in that one. Last week, I thought the obvious matchup would have been Tennessee, Florida. He went to Missouri, Kansas State. This has a similar sort of vibe, except there are ramifications that go well beyond a football game that's going to set the tone for conference play and give one of these teams a bona fide top 15 ranking if they emerge victorious. That is what is on the line on the field. Off the field, it's much more than that, because these are the two programs that the college football world, a great sport run by below average people on the whole, has decided are not worthy of being in a Power 5 conference. That's what college sports has decided, and the powers that be and the decision makers all across the country. They've decided Oregon State and Washington State, you're not worth it. Stanford lost to Sacramento State. Cal was down 17-0 to Idaho. Those are FCS programs, by the way. Good ones, but still FCS programs. They were at home. And those two schools, those institutions, are worthy of a power conference starting in 2024. But you, Oregon State and Washington State, you're not worth it. You don't have the requisite sort of value. And Washington State and Oregon State, I hope they play in an all-time thriller. Martin Stadium is going to be packed. It's not a palace or a cathedral of college football, but it is a loud, ruckus, awesome environment. Just ask Wisconsin what it's like to go in there to play. I think they learned pretty quickly how hard it is to win up there in Pullman. But this is a game in which Oregon State and Washington State are going to have the opportunity to show the rest of the world you're wrong. You're wrong to say that we don't belong in a power conference. Yeah, you can look at all these other sports. Neither one's been great in the men's basketball department, made any noise, and they don't live in big media markets and whatnot. What does everybody care about the most? College football. That's what we care about. That's the primary factor in realignment. Now, presidents vote on realignment. Yes, that is true. But the athletically driven motivations that exist in the college realignment space exist because of football. Basketball's not driving the bus. And here are these programs in small towns. They're the second school or viewed as such within their own states. They're two of the just three Pac-12 schools to never appear in a Pac-12 title game. They don't attract a big enough TV audience. They're not a big enough media market, not a big enough brand and everything like that. That's all they've heard all offseason. And they have a chance to go out on the field in Pullman on Saturday and show we belong at that level over there that you say we're not good enough for. That's what's really on the line. They can make that sort of statement. And look, I think they've already made that statement in some respect through the first 3 weeks of this season and the entire offseason, the build of Oregon State, the ascension of Washington State this year to be inside the top 25. But it can really be a solidified point that they drive home as universities and as football teams and as fans with a great showing. I want to see all the pomp and circumstance you can. I want to see as many eyeballs on Pullman as there deserve to be. There probably won't be, but boy, do there deserve to be. Because those are two good football programs, one of which coming into the year was considered by many, myself included, as a Pac-12 conference contender, which is the best league in America. If Washington State wins this game, by the way, they will put themselves squarely in that conversation. That is undeniable. If you have a Power 5 win over a preseason top 25 team and you beat a team that everyone else sees correctly as a conference contender and you're 4-0, how are you not a conference contender at that point in the year? A lot on the line for both of these teams, but I hope they have a great crowd, which they should. I hope it's a great game. I hope it's quality football. And I hope people start to reconsider the notion that Oregon State and Washington State should be left behind because they don't exist squarely within the biggest media markets. It's just, I've made my thoughts on this matter very, very clear. And look, they're both great examples as well of everything that actually goes into making a good college football team and having a good athletics program in a particular sport. So let's talk about college football. College football has a lot of factors that go into determining success. You got to have the right coach. If you're in a bigger media market, that could get more attention and help in recruiting. You might have more recruits in your backyard, which neither of these schools do. Because Washington State, recruiting-wise, is the second option in the state of Washington. Oregon State, the same in the state of Oregon. Oregon high school football doesn't have that many recruits at a high level anyway that come out every year. Washington has been better in that sense. But when people are considering, whether or not these schools are worth it, whether or not they should be a power program and such, and the factors that have led the college sports world to determine, nope, they should be relegated to the G5 level, which is utterly ridiculous. It's a flawed way of thinking. So if you're going to eat a 5-course meal that is your college football program and its success, you've got the appetizer, the salad, the soup, the entree, and the dessert. You got 5 courses in there. Oregon State and Washington State, if they are preparing a meal for us, the consumers, to consume, they don't have access on the recruiting front or media market front to perhaps the best high-quality fish or meat you need to make a top-tier entree, which is what a lot of people look at. But when they can get everything else right, you can actually give someone a better overall meal than a school that is able to give you, Texas A&M, high-level entrees, recruiting, which is referred to often as the lifeblood of your program. In many ways, that's true. But if that were the only thing that mattered, Texas A&M would be better than Oregon State or Washington State. I forgot, what's Texas A&M ranked right now? Oh, that's right, they're not. Because they've recruited at a high level, but they haven't done anything else right. So what meal would you rather have? An appetizer that's an 8 out of 10, a salad that's a 7 out of 10, soup that is a 9.5 out of 10, a 6 out of 10 entree, and a dessert that's a 10 out of 10? Or would you rather have all the others be 4 and the entree be a 12 out of 10? Oregon State and Washington State don't have much money. They don't have the biggest media market that they have access to for branding. They don't recruit it at as high a level. They don't have as much money as some other places, like a Texas A&M, who I'm picking on because they are the quintessential example of how money can get you a lot, but it doesn't automatically make you good. You can have a good entree, but if it's a 5-course meal, it doesn't mean it's going to be a great experience if everything else stinks. Whereas if you get everything right and you make the best of the entree that you can, guess what? You can deliver a better meal to the consumer, that being us, the fans, than you can if you just get the entree really, really right. And that's where the thinking is flawed, and it's unfortunate, and I hope one day Oregon State and Washington State can find their way into a power conference because they deserve it and they have run their programs correctly over the last several years to put themselves in this position. I think it's going to be a great spectacle for both teams. I think it's going to be a great spectacle for West Coast football, which is in a precarious situation to say the least, but it's going to be an exciting football game as well. Lots to watch for in that game particularly. Plenty of lines to watch for over at FanDuel, though. They've got everything you need to snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's it, $5, and you get 200 bonus bets guaranteed. Win or lose, just that simple. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and our official partner here at the Locked On Network. Got all the betting lines you need for college football. Go check them out. Gosh, I felt like I was on a little bit of a heater there at the end of that first segment. Second segment sip is in the books, which means it's time for the second segment, which is this matchup itself, which I'm diving into today because it deserves all the hype that I am giving it and that it is largely not going to receive in the national media landscape. It'll just be, good game up there, top 25 matchup, whatever. That's not how we feel about it right here on the show. So, biggest matchups to watch within the context of this football game, which will take place on Saturday. Game is, I believe, on FS1, so at least it's not stuck on the Pac-12 network. That would be a real travesty. But alas, it is not, at least last I had checked. Number one thing that I'm watching for in this game is DJ Uiagalelei against Jake Dickert. I have long sung the praises of Jake Dickert here on this show ever since I started hosting it. And my take has been very simple on that front. Jake Dickert's a good football coach because he is. And during his time as the interim head coach and then the full-time head coach each of the last 2 seasons, he is well over 500 in his tenure, number one. And number two, he's taken the identity of Washington State's football program and shifted it to what he does, which is he is a former defensive coordinator. And they still have a capable offense. We saw it against Wisconsin. We saw it against Colorado State, who apparently is tougher than we think. So Cameron Ward is a fantastic offensive player, but still the identity of this Washington State team. And I was talking yesterday about, which contender, which team would be, of the ranked teams that is, who'd be the least affected by an injury to the quarterback when a backup had to play. And Washington State was higher on that list than some might think, because Cam Ward is great and he kind of is their entire offense, but the defense is really good. And Jake Dickert has given this team a clear identity. They play ferocious, havoc-style defense, and they're really well coached. Every time I watch that defensive unit, I think that's a good team. And they have some good players as well. Brandon Jackson and Ron Stone Jr. coming off the edge. Those are 2 of the best edge players in the conference. And there are some good ones. You've got Zion Tupuola-Fatui and Braylon Trice at Washington. You've got Brandon Dorlus, who's more of an interior guy, but a hybrid down at Oregon as well. Like, there are good edge players across this conference, and put whoever you want from Utah in there as well as a quality defensive end. But Jake Dickert's a really good defensive coach, and DJ Uiagalelei, through 3 weeks with the Beavs, has looked the way we expected him to, which is he doesn't have to do as much, so he's going to be more comfortable, he's going to be more efficient, and overall more effective. And that's what he's been. Now, against San Diego State last week, it wasn't exactly perfect. There were glimpses of the reasons that he got benched at Clemson that showed up a bit. He's overthrowing people. He's missing throws that you saw him make in the 2 weeks prior against UC Davis and San Jose State. It was definitely his worst game of the season. And by the way, Oregon State still won by multiple possessions because that's what good football teams do. So Jake Dickert's ability to make him uncomfortable, to give him a real test. This is a road environment. Crowd is going to be rocking. The defensive ends are really good. And that's another matchup I'll get to in just a sec. But I think that matchup of what does Jake Dickert want to do to make DJ Uiagalelei uncomfortable, to get him out of rhythm and force Oregon State to be one-dimensional, which against a good defense like Wazoo, I don't think you can afford to be. Now, is Oregon State going to be run heavy no matter what? Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true. But if DJ Uiagalelei isn't able to be what he looked like primarily against San Jose State, if he's closer to what he did against San Diego State, Washington State could be in a really good position to win the football game. So schematically, how they approach that, what they want to force DJ to do, what they're willing to give him, what they want to take away, I think that's a really, really interesting matchup. And speaking of which, Ron Stone Jr. and Brandon Jackson against the Oregon State offensive line. This is a battle of best on best. You see this at football practice all the time. Hey, best on best. Here we go. That's what this is, because Washington State's defense has played really well this year. They played well against Wisconsin. They had a touchdown. They had a couple forced fumbles. I mean, like, Stone is a beast. That dude is a beast. At the end of the year, he'll get my unofficial vote for all Pac-12 first team. I can already tell you, because he's so darn good. I would put him on the first team before the season too. So, but they don't give me a vote. Maybe we can change that one day. I don't know. Maybe, possibly. Anyway, so those two guys have been the cornerstones of this Washington State defense. And what is the best part about this Oregon State football team? You could argue it's Damian Martinez. The defenses look good to this point. I'd say it's the offensive line. I thought it was the best in the conference based on what they did last year and what they had returning coming into the season. I think your two best offensive lines entering the year were Oregon State and Utah. I think that's mostly played itself out. Washington's has been very good. Oregon's been good. And so too has USC's. So all the contenders have got good offensive lines. I think Oregon State's has been exceptional, and that's what I expected them to be. But if they hold up and take away the pass rush where Washington State can get pressure with 4, which is why they're such a good defense to this point and why they've been so ferocious in forcing turnovers, is their ability to get pressure off of either edge while only rushing 4 guys. If that is taken away, that's a big edge for Oregon State. But if Ron Stone Jr. and Brandon Jackson can make DJ Uiagalelei uncomfortable, then advantage Washington State. And then there has to be a counter from Brian Lindgren and Jonathan Smith. I think this is a matchup of two really good football coaches, of two good football teams. And I think that particular matchup, those two defensive ends against the Oregon State offensive line, will go a long way in determining who ends up winning the game. Now, last one here, the Oregon State secondary against Cam Ward and the Washington State receivers, but specifically Cameron Ward. This has been a theme when talking about Washington State over the last couple of years. When Cameron Ward plays well, Washington State wins far more often than not. When he is playing well, he's throwing the ball down the field, he's got a higher completion percentage, and he's not turning the football over. When he falters, the completion percentage drops, he's not completing as many passes down the field, and he's turning the football over. What version of him do we get, and what does he have against this Oregon State secondary? This defense played really well last week against San Diego State. They were the primary reason they won the game. The offense really was the worst it's been in each of the first 3 weeks, and still it never felt like the game was in jeopardy because Oregon State's defense played so darn well. So Cam Ward, in the biggest games Washington State has played in the last couple of years, has had some key turnovers. Like against Oregon last year in Pullman, for example. Cameron Ward played very, very well. His team was down 3 after the defense, allowed a bunch of scores to Oregon late in the game. The Ducks came back. They took a 3-point lead, and then Cam Ward threw the game-clinching pick 6, or else they would have had a chance to go down the field and score. Now, it was just on, a tunnel screen. The defensive end read it and jumped out, but Cam Ward didn't see him, and as soon as he threw it, he knew, oh no, that's not good. There have been a number of moments like that in which Cam Ward has turned the ball over in key spots. If he protects the football in this game, he's going to give Washington State a real chance to win. He really, really is. And another fourth matchup, I only had 3 written down, but one that I just thought of is to help Cam Ward on that front and not have to, rely on him so much against a good Oregon State defense that's always well schemed by Trent Bray, the Beavs defensive coordinator. How well can Washington State run the football? Like, can they just be serviceable? Just be solid. Doesn't need to be dynamic. I don't need 200 yards. I don't need 180 yards rushing. Can you just have like 120 yards on like 3.5 yards per carry, 3.5 to 4 yards a carry? Just something solid. Enough to keep the defense honest, keep your offense balanced, and keep Trent Bray guessing on the other side for what you're going to do in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 situations. Have the option to be able to run the football. Because if Trent Bray knows what you have to do because you're not able to run it, that's not a place you want to be, because much like Jake Dickert is a really, really good defensive coach and implements that scheme exceptionally well, Trent Bray is one of the best defensive minds in the Pac-12, and he'll eat you alive if you're one-dimensional and predictable. So curious as to your guys' thoughts on the game. Drop it in the YouTube comments below or hit me up on Twitter at Smalls_55 or at LO_Pac12. DMs and mentions are wide open. Game time is always wide open with tickets to whatever event you want to go to, because it's the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. There's enough ways to get stress in life, but buying tickets to your favorite events, it just doesn't need to be stressful. Forget buying tickets months in advance and use Game Time, which has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. You can also get images of your seat before you go, so you can understand exactly what the view is, whether or not you like it, whether or not it'll be good enough, or whether or not you want to change. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, last topic for today is one that I've brought up on the last couple of shows a bit. The idea of getting 2 Pac-12 teams into the playoff from a competitive depth standpoint should be possible. Then I started to think about it, and number one, Pac-12 fans, like, we got to just be looking at, hey, can one team make it? Because I don't think that that's going to happen, because the league is so good. Are there teams capable of getting to the playoff? Yes. Are they good enough to get there? Yes. But there are so many teams like that, the schedules just look brutal. And it could come down to injuries, like Cam Rising, eventually coming back for the Utes. They have UCLA this week, and it's still unclear as to whether or not Cam Rising will play. But it could come down to injuries. It could come down to a bounce of ball game. Something goes your way, something does it. It could come down to a call from an officiating crew or a replay review in a big game. Like, it feels like the margins are really, really tight now that we're getting into conference play. But there was discussion on Twitter last week about, oh man, could the Pac-12 get 2 teams into the playoff? Like, yes, the conference is deep enough to give you 2 college football playoff caliber resumes, but it's so deep, I don't see us getting into that position, because the idea of getting a 2-loss team in is unlikely, not impossible. It hasn't happened before. That doesn't mean it couldn't. I discussed it like this. If you had a 12-0 team in the championship game against a 10-2 team in the championship game, let's say it was, USC and Washington, for instance, and Washington's 12-0 and USC's 10-2. This is all just a hypothetical, of course. If USC beats Washington after having lost to them in the regular season, well, that kind of negates the one loss, and then Washington in that scenario would be 12-1, which is what TCU was last year. Hard to see how they wouldn't get in. But here's why I think we need to just keep the discussion around, can the Pac-12 get 1 team into the playoff for the first time in 7 years? Because 2 teams is really, really tough, because you got a 4-team playoff here, and the SEC champion is getting into the playoff. I know the Pac-12 has elevated its brand, ironically, in the last year of its existence and everything. I still sense that there's East Coast bias out there sufficient to not allow 2 Pac-12 teams in or a 2-loss Pac-12 team. I mean, Tennessee and Florida are both in the top 25. Why? That's a great question. There's no reason for that. Virginia is terrible. That's Tennessee's lone Power 5 win. Virginia got housed by Florida. Florida got trounced by Utah with a backup quarterback. Neither of those teams should be in the top 25, but they both are, because it's still the SEC. So the SEC champion, which will probably be Georgia, could be LSU. I have a lot of reservations about Alabama, who's only one spot behind or ahead of Oregon State right now. In case you think money is everything in college sports, it is not. It helps. It does a lot of things for you. But like I was saying earlier with the 5-course meal, if you get the entree right, but the other 4 things are wrong, that's not a great experience, but it's still, bumped up by the entree. But if you get the other 4 things right and you just don't have the ingredients to make a great entree, you can still deliver a really, really good meal on the whole. So plus, first impression, last impression matters most. So nail the appetizer, nail the dessert, you're good to go. The SEC champion's going to get in, whether that's Georgia, LSU, or Alabama, I don't know, but feels like Georgia's the best team I've seen out of the SEC so far. No surprise there. Let's say they go undefeated or have one loss, they will get in. So that would put the SEC champion in. The Big Ten champion. I think there will be a one-loss team as a conference champion that emerges between Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan in no particular order there. That team is getting in. I don't think if the Pac-12 is able to deliver a one-loss or undefeated conference champion, an 11-1 Big Ten team that didn't even reach the conference title game will get in like Ohio State last year, but the Big Ten champion in all likelihood is getting in. So if the Pac-12 were to get 2 teams in, they would either need the SEC champion to beat, like let's say Georgia goes, whoever they would play, like if it was, let's say it's a repeat of last year. Let's say Georgia goes in at 11-1, and then LSU plays them in the conference championship game at 9-3, and they beat them. That would remove the SEC from the playoff. You would need a similar thing in the Big Ten, though in the Big Ten is a lot less likely. The gap is too large between the top and the middle to bottom of the conference there, so I don't think that's I don't think that's going to happen. Florida State is the other wild card here. Oh, by the way, don't forget about Texas, because if Texas is an undefeated or one-loss conference champion, they're getting in automatically. The Big 12 champion, no, not automatically. Oklahoma could if they were to run the table or be a one-loss champ. But if Texas were to do it, then they would also get some wiggle room because they're such a big brand. Like, the College Football Playoff Committee wants to put Texas in the playoff. That happens. But between Texas, Florida State, and the SEC, someone's got to falter. I think the Big Ten, as I think about this more, explaining it here on the show, is a lock to get into the playoff. But between the ACC not sending Florida State, maybe North Carolina makes a big run. I think FSU is a really good football team, despite their struggles with Boston College this past weekend. If Florida State needs to falter, or Texas, and then the SEC champion would have to be, a 2 or 3 loss team that is, just okay. That's how the Pac-12 could get 2 teams in. But that's on the condition that a team that you have either a 1-loss and a 0-loss team playing in the conference title game and the 1-loss team wins, a la Alabama and Georgia 2 years ago. If you have that scenario, okay. But there are just, with only 4 spots available and the number of teams that look like they're contending for that spot, Big Ten champion's going to be there. Texas could be there. I think SEC champion will be there. And the Pac-12 needs to fill that 4th slot. But I will say this, a 1-loss Pac-12 champion should be in no matter what. History tells you that help is given to those who hold their own. If you are a 1-loss Power 5 champion, I don't think any of those have ever missed the 4-team college football playoff. So I think that the conference is deep enough to give us 2 teams into the playoff, but there's still a lot of things that have to go the Pac-12's way. I think it's going to be a 1-bid league at most, and I still think that's going to be a challenge, so I think we keep the focus there. Send me your thoughts as always. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.